Gorm, the fantastic adventure of the Dwarf Blacksmith. Gorm was a strong and formidable dwarf, like a blacksmith's hammer. A red beard that hung down to his chest and the same color forelock on his shaved head looked like an unquenchable flame. He spent his whole life in the forge, making and repairing weapons and various mechanisms for the dwarves of the city of Forcia. But all his previous exploits paled in comparison to what happened that night, when he accidentally entered the Green Cauldron Inn. As usual, he walked straight from his forge to the center of the gnome city of Forcia, lost among the mountain peaks. However, when he heard loud laughter and noise from the inn, he could not resist and decided to stop by for a moment. The walls of the inn, illuminated by the dim light of candles, rumbled from the dwarfs who were drinking, surrounded by crowds of enthusiastic listeners. In the center of the noisy company stood the four gnomes, Willy, Grim, Bert and Lutz, and told some incredible story that made everyone around listen. It soon became clear that they were celebrating a bachelor party, and one of them was the fiancé of the daughter of the mayor, and they were going to enter the castle to surprise the bride. In the tavern, Gorm met all the participants of the bachelor party: Willy, the groom, Grim, the groom's best friend, and the brothers Bert and Lutz, who were familiar with Grim. Gorm listened with enthusiasm to their plans for the evening and wanted to join them. Gorm immediately noticed that the group was preparing for something big and dangerous. He felt that he could be useful to them in the case, and offered his help. Grim, appreciating Gorm's knowledge of blacksmithing, agreed to take him on the team. Gorm began to observe the group to find out the plans. He noticed that they were planning to break into the castle at night through the sewer system. Gorm realized that he could be useful to the group because he had experience patching holes in the castle sewers and was familiar with its secret passages. Carried away by a new adventure, Gorm joined a group of dwarves and together they went to the castle. He felt excitement and adrenaline, which was unusual for him, but at the same time he was confident in his knowledge and abilities. A group of dwarves, including Gorm, arrived at the castle in the dark. They crept up to the castle wall and quickly found a hatch that led into the sewers. They descended and headed under the wall towards the castle. The group walked silently and carefully, being careful not to attract the attention of the castle guards. As they made their way through the sewers, Gorm began to notice that his fellow dwarves were behaving strangely and whispering to each other. Gorm began to suspect that they were hiding something from him. After some time, they reached the last door, which was supposed to lead them to the bride. Gorm took out the key he had received from one of the dwarves and opened the door. However, outside the door was not the bride and her bedroom, but a room with guards and a large golden axe that lay on the table. The axe was incredibly beautiful and impressive. It was made of strong gold, inlaid with brilliant rubies. The axe had two sharply sharpened blades, each of which was sharpened to perfect sharpness. The handle of the axe was also decorated with stones, and was wide enough to provide a firm grip. The dwarves suddenly attacked Gorm, snatched the key from him and threw him out the door. Gorm heard them lock the door and run away, leaving him alone in the room with the guards. He was stunned and knew that this was the end. No one will save him, and no one will listen to his story. He decided to try to escape, but the guards immediately grabbed him. When he was interrogated, he was ready to tell everything he knew. However, he only knew the full story that his new acquaintances told him. The guardians were surprised at how easily Gorm gave in. However, they were sure that he was hiding something important. When the investigation was completed, Gorm knew that this was the end of his freedom and he would be sentenced to a long prison term. Unfortunately, things turned out much worse than he expected. He was sentenced to death. He was stunned when the guards entered his cell and informed him of his fate. It might be better to rephrase the sentence to something like, he knew that his life was soon to be over and felt a sense of hopelessness. The guards led him along the wall, his hands tied and his head covered with a sack. He could feel his steps getting heavier and his heart beating harder and harder. He knew that he had nothing to lose, and tried to keep his honor to the end. However, in the slot of the bag that was on his head, he saw the same hatch through which they entered the castle, the robbers did not bother to close it on the way back. Without hesitation, Gorm took a step to the side and immediately ended up in the sewers. Gorm quickly looked around and realized that he was in a sewer corridor, the other side of which led somewhere deep into the city. He quickly dropped the bag from his head and began to run and accelerate, but his bound hands prevented him from moving quickly. He knew that the guards would soon be looking for him and that he had to get away as quickly as possible. He heard a noise behind him and knew that the guards were already nearby. He paused for a moment to take a breath and decide what to do next. Suddenly, an idea came to him. He noticed that the guards were divided, and he decided to take advantage of this moment. He hid in a branch of one of the pipes and waited for the pursuer. After the guard approached him, Gorm, using his bound hands as a makeshift weapon like a hammer, hit the guard on the head. The guard fell to the ground with a terrible crash. Despite the fact that the rest of the guards, having heard the noise, ran to the place where it happened, Gorm had already managed to hide in the sewer corridor. Hiding from the guards, Gorm ran ahead, hoping that he could get out of the sewer maze and hide somewhere in the city. He knew that it would be difficult to catch him, but he also knew that he needed to stay on the lookout and not lower his guard. He quickly found sharp rocks on the floor and began cutting off his ropes. Soon his hands were free and he felt relieved. He slowed down his run so as not to attract attention, and began to carefully make his way along the sewer corridor, avoiding mud and puddles. He knew he had to find a way out of the sewers, but didn't know how. He continued to move forward, but all the corridors looked the same, and he began to lose hope. However, in the end, he heard the sound of water and felt the fresh air. He quickened his steps and soon found a way out of the sewers. He was glad he had found a way out, but it was clear to him that he needed to hide and find shelter before the guards found him. He looked around and noticed a small house not far from the sewer exit. He went to the house and saw that there was no one there. He went inside and took a quick look around. He found a knife and several pieces of bread that had been left on the table. Gorm sat in the hut, listening to the silence. He came up with the idea to find his buddies. He remembered that they were staying at an outlying inn, the Three-Legged Pony. Gorm decided that finding them was his only chance to clear his name. He went to the hotel. He moved quickly, trying to minimize the time he needed to spend in the open. Upon arriving at the inn, Gorm noticed that it was closed. He stood still and thought about what to do when he heard a noise from inside. He made up his mind and knocked on the door. It was opened to him by Lissy, the daughter of the innkeeper. She said that the group of gnomes he was searching for had left a few minutes earlier. Gorm was catching up with 4 fighters, Will, Grim, Bert and Lutz, who were walking along the road armed with swords, an axe and a bow, and he had only a knife. He knew he had to be careful not to get too close to them. He tried to use every element of the environment to his advantage, hiding behind trees and rocks. As he ran up behind them, he stabbed Will in the head with his huge fist, then jumped back avoiding Bert's attacks. Will's body collapsed between them unconscious. Gorm knew he couldn't fight them as equals, so he used every opportunity to weaken them. He threw a rock at Grim, which distracted him for a moment and gave Gorm a chance to stab him in the leg, causing him to slow down. Lutz fired his bow, but missed, and Gorm threw the knife in his direction. The knife flew clumsily, but caught the string of the bow and it broke with a crash at the same hour. At that moment, Gorm ran up to Bert and, using his axe as a lever, knocked him down, then snatching a stolen golden axe from his bag and began swinging it like a windmill. The movements were extremely clumsy, however, after the tip of the axe fell off and flew into Lutz's head, knocking him to the ground, the robbers decided to surrender. Gorm quickly tied them up and headed towards the city guards. When Gorm led the bandits to the guards and returned the golden axe, he was offered a partial pardon for his sins. But in order to fully atone for his guilt, Gorm was sent to serve in a military unit. He accepted this offer, realizing that this is the only way to correct his past mistakes. Gorm was sent to training to improve his combat skills and prepare for future missions. He had to fight with experienced warriors who taught him new fighting techniques and helped improve his physical condition. Soon Gorm was ready for battle and was assigned to a patrol mission around the city. He and his team went around numerous villages and settlements, protecting them from enemy attacks and helping the inhabitants. During the course of his missions, Gorm made new friends and became a respected member of the military company.